everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Jim Fitzgerald, also known as Fitz. Fitz, how are you tonight?
Also known as James R. Fitzgerald for our producer's sake. I am fine, Ray, and I'm glad we're back with Gail and discussing the Lindsay Buziak case. If you want to introduce her a little bit, then we'll summarize the case and take it from there.
Gail has been involved in this case since the very beginning. The murder of Lindsay Buziak remains one of the most sophisticated targeted homicides in recent memory because of one central fact. This was a spontaneous murder. It was an engineered event. Lindsay was lured to a vacant home in Saanich under the guise of showing $1 million property to prospective buyers. She was murdered within minutes of entering. The offenders vanished without identification, leaving virtually no forensic evidence. We're going to talk from an investigative standpoint tonight, but first, Jim is going to give you a recap of what we talked about last time we were on the air. Jim?
Well, Gail was the first responder, one of them, emergency medical technician, and perhaps by other titles too. But she was
Gail was
uh,
not. Gail was not one of the That was someone else. She was not the EMT, Jim.
okay,
She
but
ran Murder on Sousa. She ran the website and has talked to investigators and other witnesses that are familiar with Lindsay and some of the things that Lindsay was involved in.
my mistake.
No worries.
Gail has more of a overview of this entire case from the top down, a bird's eye view, having followed it from very early on, and uh, and she knows other people involved, including the EMTs and the other folks who went to the scene. But her perspective on all of this is more after the fact and taking it from there. So yeah, thank you for not getting our guest, me getting our guest mixed up there. But Gail, welcome back. And you had valuable information last week regarding everything that you've been following in this case, and I know you took some heat for some of that from people, and some people like what you're doing out there, some people don't. But you've marched in marches for Lindsay over the years. I don't believe you ever met her, but from everything you've heard, she was a wonderful person. You met the other players involved in this. Uh, some you get along with, some not so much. So, but we appreciate everything you shared with us last week, and thank you so much for that.
Well, welcome back, Gail.
Thank you. And I would like to say before we begin, I'd like to thank you both and your producers for everything you've done for Lindsay in keeping this alive and keeping it going. Because I know you've got your own U.S. murders down there at Solve Unsolved Murders. So taking this on, we thank you ever so much. A lot of us, all of us, really
Oh, you're
care about
welcome.
this.
You're welcome. You know, with this case, I've been giving a lot of thought to last week and looking at it from an investigative standpoint that I would look at it from. And I think the real crime began before the murder itself. I think that's probably one of the most important investigative points. And everyone keeps focus on the stabbing here. I think investigators should start focusing on the setup. I think that the homicide began when someone selected Lindsay. They obtained her private cell phone number. They created a buyer scenario. They chose the property. They controlled the timing, and they made sure that she acted alone. So, in my estimation, this tells me that the offender or planner or planners had specific knowledge of a couple different things. Number one, Lindsay's work, her schedule, her access to listings, and how real estate showings operate. So, with that said, and I'm going to throw this out to you, Gail, I want to get your inside knowledge on this. To me, it strongly suggests that inside knowledge or someone in close proximity to her life uh, was operating. And so I'm thinking the offender is in one of three circles, either in her personal or social circle, her business or real estate circle or a criminal network that was had access to her personal intelligence. This definitely was not random. What are your thoughts based upon the 16, 17 years that you've been operating and looking into this case, Gail?
I would lean more to her personal network, but I would also perhaps lean to maybe a crime syndicate of Victoria with some very select people that have a lot of control of what goes on in that city.
Yeah, and Ray, everything you described is pre-offense behavior
Yes.
on the part of the killers, and we know there was more than one. We don't know exactly who wielded the knife that uh, gave Lindsay 40 different wounds during the course of this assault. Potentially another person involved, but certainly two people at least were part of the setup. So you're right. The crime scene is one thing, and we've learned a lot from that. That is at least made public so far. But there was a whole preliminary set of machinations and communications and interconnectivity between people who said, you know, this Lindsay woman has to be taken out. Here's the reason why. We don't know that exact reason, but that reason was very important to them. What one of the key questions would be, how long was this in pre-planning? How long was this pre-offense behavior? It's very likely the people that did the stabbing in the house, the stabbing, the murder of Lindsay, were not necessarily the ones that put this plan together. There was
Agreed.
someone else out there calling the shots, setting up, bringing these people in for whatever reason to carry out this task. So, how far back did it go? We know at least a few days when Lindsay received this call on the burner phone from these other people, what turned out to be a burner phone, and as some young couple moving into the area, want to look at a house, and they found this right one. But how long did that pre-planning go on? And yeah, that would be an important question to have answered by the Saanich police. But so far, if they have that answer, or how far back this planning goes, it's not known to it's not known to us anyway.
Jim, I kind of agree with you, and Lindsay, or I'm sorry, Gail, jump in on this, but I totally agree that the two people that entered the house were more the executioners. They were not the true architects of this operation. I think there were planners here that designed the operation, helped choose Lindsay at the best appropriate time. They control communication. Then I think there of the facilitators that helped get the burner phone. They gathered logistics about this, and they may have even possibly transported the offenders away from the scene. The execution team was the man and woman that posed as the buyers. Um, Police are searching for the killers when what they should really be focusing on, in my estimation, is who created the appointment. How did that all come about? And I don't, do you know, Gail, how that came about?
Who created the appointment?
Yeah, for this to happen.
No, I don't. I believe there was approximately 10 phone calls altogether, which started on the Wednesday. Um, and I know one of Lindsay's friends who was talking to her on the Thursday evening when Lindsay said, "Oh, I've got to go. The Mexicans are calling on my cell. I got to get to the bottom of this." That was Thursday. I believe there was a call on Wednesday. And then, of course, a few calls on Friday and a few on Saturday. So, why we need to 10 phone calls back and forth doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Do you know, Gail, if the calls were all between this supposedly Spanish speaking woman and Lindsay, or were there other calls to other people? In other words, was Jason Zillow or Shirley Zillow involved in any of these calls?
No, not that I'm aware of. I mean, there was a point where Jason said he was home one or two of those times that Lindsay took a call, but nobody really knows. Lindsay's gone and she can't answer these questions.
True, true.
Ray, I mean, everything we're trying to lay out here is very important, not just identifying the killers, but identifying the Mr. Big, the facilitator who put this together. But and we talked about communications and interconnectivity and perhaps even funding. Someone probably got paid for this, whether big bucks, medium bucks, little bucks to take her out. But what we also need to know is what was the motivation? What information, as sophisticated, and I'll give them some kudos because, quite frankly, it's been 20 years and this matter hasn't been solved, almost that anyway. And it's been this long, and I'll give kudos to whatever team was put together to carry out this murder because they haven't been identified. They certainly haven't been arrested, but they may have had faulty information. There's nothing we know from Lindsay's past except she kind of associated on and off and on the periphery of some of these bad guys, these drug dealers, people that were arrested before, after this time frame. But as sophisticated as the action they put together was, was their information bad? And I know it gets confusing because Lindsay told her father she knows something really big, and she wants to tell people about it, and she couldn't tell her father. So is that what she's referring to, and is that why she was murdered so viciously, um, or did they just get the information wrong to begin with, and someone else may have had the information that they thought Lindsay had? So was she killed for a very specific purpose, or was she killed by bad information? And that's just what we can't figure out at this point. And it doesn't it doesn't take away from her murder, of course, whether it was she really did see or hear something, or she didn't really see or hear something. But it also goes back into the motivation. And Ray, the initial
Yeah.
question you brought up with whoever set this thing up, why did they do it? And was it even good information, quote unquote? And that we don't know.
Jim, I think that's why we talked, and I know Gail has talked about this too. Going back and looking at the past of Lindsay and what Lindsay was involved in, not just Lindsay, but her circle of friends, her boyfriend, all the people that she was close to. What is it that occurred in their life within the last 30 days to 60 days that they were involved in, whatever it may be? And I have no idea what that is, but what is it that attracted? I mean, because this is not a random act. She was specifically selected and chosen because of something. And Jim's talking about motivation. And the motivation lies in her victimology. And it may not be Lindsay's victimology. It may be her boyfriend Jason's victimology. Looking back at his thing, or her girlfriends. It may be something with them as well. So it's that's a great question. That's where, if I'm an investigator, that's what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on what happened in her life that caused this to happen to her. What is it? You know?
I
Uh,
believe she saw something she shouldn't have seen. I can't get past that, and I believe it was something in her inner circle when when she was with Jason. He was had some shady characters he was involved with, and I'm sure Lindsay didn't like that, but there's probably didn't have much choice on who he was hanging around with. He had one Ziggy Matheson is very questionable because in 2013, Ziggy Matheson was busted on drug trafficking charges, and he was living at Shirley Zalo's rental home at that time. He was living with another friend, Ali Zai, another drug trafficker. Ali was actually Ziggy's lieutenant, right hand man. And so when Chick News asked Shirley Zalo about the man that she rented that house to, her words is, "My family has no connection to the man that lives in that house." But as it turns out, Ziggy was very close friends with her two boys. Um, Ziggy was close to Chris Schwartz, who Jason went to see that night after he got out of the police station. They're all connected. They're all drug dealers. And so why Shirley Zedel lied and said they weren't connected. It was in 2007, before Lindsay was murdered, that the Zedels went on a Christmas trip, New Year's trip. They took Ziggy Masson on that trip with them. So obviously they were friends. On Facebook, Ziggy Masson's mother pops in and says, Shirley, take good care of our boy. She just moved back to Ontario in 2016. Shirley, say hello to our boys. Take good care of them. And Shirley responds, will do, Deb. That's friendship.
So, Gail, I don't think the question is why did Shirley lie about her relationship or her family's relationship or her son's relationship with Ziggy Matheson and some of the others. I think the question is, why is she trying to distance herself from them? That's the real question.
Yes.
And that's the question they should be asking.
If you have nothing to hide, why are you lying?
And why are you disassociating yourself with someone that there's clear evidence of you having some level of a relationship, even from afar or up close or somewhere within that one of those inner circles? So when you're lying about something as basic as that, the investigators have to look at that as being an integral part of the clue in terms of what ultimately led to Lindsay's death. And just disavowing this alleged relationship between several people and lying about it, that's a strong clue. And where does this person play a role in everything else that happened afterwards that Lindsay possibly saw or heard?
On the Friday night before Lindsay was murdered, this has always bothered me. On Dateline, Shirley said she wanted to make it very clear that Lindsay called her on that Friday evening and invited her out for dinner because Jason was playing hockey. Well, Lindsay spent the whole day with her girlfriend that Friday and didn't get home till after 4. Lindsay didn't like Shirley. She was leaving Jason. So God knows why she'd call her on a Friday night, invite her out for dinner. None of Lindsay's friends, they all thought it was ridiculous. On Dateline, Shirley said that night they went out for dinner for sushi, then they went for a long walk. And that was the night that Lindsay told Shirley she was afraid of her boyfriend, Matt. Nobody could believe that. It was so ridiculous. So the question is, did that Friday night really happen? Did Shirley, it's only Shirley's word. First of all, there was no restaurant receipt for the sushi restaurant. Police have no receipt to say they went there. Lindsay's dad, Jeff, Lindsay called her dad at 6:37 on that Friday evening from her cell phone. Records prove that. There was no mention of Shirley coming over, no mention that they were going out for dinner, and no mention they were going to go for a long walk. We also have a witness that came forward, a young couple, that says there's no way Shirley could have been at that house at Lindsay's place on Friday because they can place her in a different location of Victoria at 7:15 when Shirley claims she arrived at the house. That Friday night when Shirley said she arrived at Lindsay's place at 7:15, she said, I walked in and overheard Lindsay talking to the buyers. And Lindsay was giving them the address and setting up the appointment for the next day. When you eat sushi, my understanding, it stays in the system for up to 48 hours. When Lindsay was murdered, 24 hours later, the sushi would have still been in their system. And it would have showed up on an autopsy, would it not have? So if there was no sushi in her system, she was not at a sushi restaurant. At least she was eating hamburgers at the sushi restaurant. Another, we don't know, but the Saanich police certainly went out there and said, well, Lindsay gave the buyer, in a 10-minute conversation, Lindsay gave the buyer the address and set up the appointment. Where'd they get that information? From Shirley Zedel. Everything is what Jason Zedel and Shirley Zedel have said. Everything. Ziggy Matheson's friend Ali Zai, they both got busted in 2013. Ziggy Matheson got 6 years. Ali Zai got 30 months and was out 3/4 of that time. when Ali was in prison and when he got out. He was telling people that he was upset after the bust because Shirley and Jason were his boss, basically. Ziggy was his boss, but he worked for Jason and Shirley. That was a shocker. That's a tip that came in a couple of years ago, which I gave to the police. He says when he got out, he was going to go straight. He had enough of crime. He said Shirley and Jason distanced themselves from him after the murder and shut him off. And he was left on his own. He pleaded guilty. That's why he only got 30 months. He said he believed what Lindsay saw was something when she took a trip with Jason to Calgary via Kelowna and saw something in their operation because they had their own operation. That's what Ali Zaid believes. Now, he's a criminal, sure, but would he actually go to the extent of telling his cellmate and his friends when he got out?
Well, that's a good question. We'd obviously have to do some more interviews or review the interviews of him back in the day. But let's just try to break down. Ray, you and I have worked enough different kinds of cases in our past career, certainly FBI and otherwise. What could someone see? And we'll keep it in the context of a drug trade and some sort of a cartel. I guess even Canadians can have cartels, not just the Mexicans. But what could Lindsay have seen? And I mean, I can only break it down to a large amount of cash, a large amount of drugs, or perhaps, and this may be a long shot, but either a dead body or someone being severely assaulted or killed.
I can speak on that.
Go ahead, Gail.
Go.
Well, there was a young man at the end of August, I believe it was August 30th, August 29th, who went missing.
Yeah.
He's never been seen since. He was involved in marijuana grown-ups up in Shawnigan Lake. And he was associated with Ziggy Matson. And I'm told by one of Ziggy's drug friends who told me on the telephone in a telephone conversation, he said the day after, a couple of days after Lindsay's murder, the guys were all sitting in Lindsay's backyard. And he said, Ziggy's words when asked about Lindsay, he said, it was a mistake. It should never have happened. But the conversation got on too. He also told me Ziggy Matheson was the last one to see Kyle McDonald live. And I said, how can you say that? Where's your evidence? He said, I'm telling you, don't doubt me. Ziggy Matheson, was one of the last people to see Kyle McDonald alive. Kyle McDonald's girlfriend she won't talk to me. She won't talk to anybody. She just, maybe she's afraid too. And of course, Lindsay and Jason were living up at Shawnigan during the summer of that year at Shirley's place before they moved into Victoria. And they would have known Kyle McDonald, I'm sure. So he disappeared. He went to get on a plane in the Inner Harbor, flying to Vancouver to go and fish with friends. Never arrived, never seen again. Now I know he wasn't in Victoria when we don't know. He landed. None of the friends who were expecting him ever saw him. He got off the plane. There is evidence he disembarked and never seen again. But I often wonder about that because this fella told me, he said, look at Ziggy Matson. He's killed before. And I don't know. To me, that's a strong possibility. It may not be that Lindsay saw the murder, but it may be that she heard or saw something that told her these guys had been involved or Ziggy had been involved in Kyle McDonald's murder. And that sure would be enough for them to take her out, wouldn't it? Now, I've talked to Kyle McDonald's mom. She's a broken woman, the poor woman. She's lost her son. He was 24 years old. And the police don't tell her anything.
Very consistent there. Is that also Saanich police?
No, I don't believe that would have been Saanich. That probably would have been, think he was living. I think he was living in Shawnigan at that time. It would have been the Shawnigan Police Department that was notified.
Well, if you've been listening to Cold Red since January, and I know Ray and I, one of the conclusions we came to about the third or fourth episode, if the police could somehow solve the case of the missing Kyle McDonald, that would then lead them very possibly, very likely to who killed Lindsay Buziak. I believe that's not unrelated, and it's too much of a coincidence that two people within this inner circle, one goes missing, completely never to be seen again, the other one brutally stabbed 40 times within what's the time frame? Maybe 6 months, Gail?
All connected to Ziggy Matheson.
And Ziggy Maston as the middle person here. Again, innocent until proven guilty. We get that. Due process would have to take place. But I'm saying these are people that certainly should be questioned and asked. And yeah, it doesn't mean she had to see a body being put into a hole or something.
Ziggy Matheson was very violent. He was charged with murder in 2000. Him and another fellow were charged with murder. The other fellow took the fall. They were given a choice. If one of you takes the fall, we'll let the other one go. So Dave Nivergold took the fall for murdering Kevin Black. Ziggy got off on that charge. But what happened during that murder, Ziggy's ex-girlfriend was present. He beat her in the face with the butt end of a gun, so that when her parents went to see her in the hospital, they didn't recognize her. She had almost been killed. And when they asked, I think was somebody asked Dave Nivergold, why didn't you just kill Shannon? He said, we ran out of bullets. These are very violent people. Ziggy Matheson, he's killed before.
So let me just throw out, and Ray, I'll let you come in on this, but what probably happened, if we're going to stick with the Kyle McDonald part of the story, Lindsay heard something, and she may not have had a poker face. Not too many 23-year-old women do when they hear something like this. And she could have dropped a drink. She could have broke out crying. She could have, her jaw could have dropped. Perhaps she, her personality changed that night. And then who knows, with her boyfriend, Jason, or even a girlfriend, did Ziggy really mean what he said? Or what's this about Kyle? And somehow they knew, one or two people that she shared this information with, besides the personal observations, they knew that she heard someone talking about missing Kyle McDonald, probably dead, probably murdered. And they said, we can't take a chance with this. And now, if that happened back in August or so, I'm not sure exactly when this conversation may have taken place, but it wasn't until the following February when, of course, the execution, the assassination took place. So it seems now they wouldn't be sloppy enough to have her walk into a room full of drugs or cash. They could even explain that away conceivably. But if she knew Kyle and she knew he was, strangely missing, and she's very upset about this, she heard that someone took him out, murdered him. And that is what possibly she was going to tell her father, but didn't quite tell him. And people said, hey, we can't have this loose cannon out there. She's not really one of us. She's a, hanger-on, pretty girl, dating one of these guys, but it's too risky to leave her know this information. And a guy who has a predisposition to murder, Ziggy, he said, time for her to go. The plan was laid out, as we've already talked about, with the couple, burner phones, all of that, and she was murdered. And really, until I hear other evidence pointing in some other direction, as I've said back in January, figure out this Kyle McDonald, him being missing, and that will certainly lead investigators into the direction of also who killed Lindsay. Right?
Alizai also said that that Ziggy, he believed Ziggy had killed two of his previous girlfriends. Well, he didn't kill it, but they overdosed. Shannon overdosed. She was supposed to there was a trial because of him beating her almost to death. That was going to be in 2 months. She died of an overdose. Most people believe that Ziggy hot dosed her so it would never go to trial. Ali also said there was another girlfriend they believe had Ali also said, this is unbelievable, but Ali Zai also said that he believed that the Zalos brought in his sister to do the killing. Now that's far fetched, but to say that about your own sister, unbelievable.
Well, could
That
that have
is,
been
It
the
is.
mystery woman at the site with the Spanish accent?
I have no idea. His
Okay.
sister was Iranian. The whole family was. His
Okay.
sister was involved in human trafficking. She still is today. And his father was a drug dealer. He was known as the Ghost, arrested in Florida for money laundering and yeah, sending money out of the country to Iran. The whole family was bad. So I don't see Ali lying. He believed that the Zalos brought in somebody to have her murdered, and he believed that Lindsay saw something in their operation when she was with Jason. So,
Saw or heard or both, and that led to the plan of action, which
yep.
eventually resulted in her death.
And where is this Ali today? Nowhere to be found.
I really like to move into the crime itself, and I know we've been talking about the use of a couple that was used to kill Lindsay, and I think in something like this, I think it had a psychological impact on Lindsay because I think using a male and female pair reduced the fear in Lindsay, although she still was a little alarmed at what was going on. But if it would have been a single male, it may have triggered something. But when you have a well dressed couple that's shopping for luxury homes, it gives a little bit of credibility and it lowers threat perception, although it didn't quite do that all the way for Lindsay. But in my estimation, the the effect of this indicates behavior sophistication on the part of the offenders. In other words, I think they understood how important it was to manage the victim. And I'm not talking simply about killing Lindsay, but having her and ensuring that she would voluntarily enter the kill zone. To me, that's offender control. Jim, what do you think?
Oh yeah, and it goes back to what we said early on. This was well planned, well organized. I mean, they could have staged a car accident. It looks like this others are accused of poisoning some women, or there are all kinds of things they could have put in their drink and made it look like suicide, something. But they wanted to put out a very strong message in this, and this could have been one. Hate to get graphic here, but one shot to the back of the neck could have been really just one stab wound. But they wanted to make this um, something. They wanted to send a message at the same time, and uh, because maybe there's some other people they feared were talking. And quite frankly, that's not far of a stretch because nobody seems to want to talk about this case, even upwards of 20 years later. And a lot of these other girl, slash friends of Lindsay, and who just, and boyfriends of, I'm sorry, the girlfriend of Kyle McDonald doesn't want to say anything. I mean, to some degree, you understand their hesitance, their reluctance in that regard. But yeah, this was laid out almost as perfectly as can be to keep Lindsay's suspicions to a minimum. Boy, I just wondered how it would have changed the retired RCMP um, um, officer who also worked in the real estate company who volunteered to go with Lindsay that day. I mean, would they have killed him too? I doubt it. But it just became a perfect storm for the bad guys in this case, and certainly with really bad results for Lindsay. But and some things could have altered and could have changed, and they would have had to find some other way. But and they obviously felt comfortable doing it in the city of Saanich, British Columbia, and they felt somehow that even when the investigation started, they'd be okay. I'm not saying through any criminal conspiratorial efforts, but just because they just felt the PD wouldn't have the capabilities of solving this case. I don't know, but again,
What
looking at the
about
bad
seven
guy's
police?
perspective, perfect storm. Go ahead,
What
Gil.
about seven Sanders police officers retiring the day before the murder? Why didn't they bring a couple of them back? I mean, no, the day before the murder, seven. highly
Uh,
skilled police officers.
I,
Wow.
I mean, coincidence. I'm sure that I can't imagine. Yeah, we're not suggesting they
No,
knew of the murder the day
no,
before and they planned their retirement around this, but they certainly could have brought back those
brought back.
retirees. Happens all the time in the FBI. Bring agents back on contracts once they retire with certain skill sets. So yeah,
I
there's
like I liked what Lisa said when she said that she doesn't, for the life of her, she can't figure out why Jason didn't jump the fence himself to go straight into that house instead of helping Cohen Oatman over the fence and letting him go in to come around and open the front door. Um, and of course, I don't understand. Jason goes through that front door and goes straight up to the master bedroom. On Dateline, he said, I touched her skin. I knew she had passed away. But then we hear later, the Time Columnist story, that he actually said he gave her CPR but stopped because of the air, whatever. But Lindsay was lying there with a gaping hole at the base of her throat. Her throat had been slashed. She's covered in blood. Why would you give somebody CPR when they've got a hole in their throat and they're covered in blood?
I agree. And one of the things about that crime scene is the thing that Jim and I have seen many, many times is the question of overkill. And just so our audience understands, overkill is a means that's used that's not necessary in order to commit or in order to complete the act. Lindsay was stabbed dozens of times. So that level of violence to me suggests that there was rage, there was some sort of personal grievance, there was emotional hostility. And I think that this is where, to me, it becomes a little more complicated because the setup feels professional, but the killing to me feels personal. And I think that that contradicts two theories. And I want to know what you think about these two theories. So, the first one, in my estimation, is that this homicide was staged as an organized hit. So, here's the thing someone close to Lindsay orchestrated this event and then tried to distance themselves. Indicators is a highly target personal violence and controlled environment. And I think that to me is, in my estimation, the strongest. But I can't dismiss, and I know you've talked about this too, Gail, that there's also been speculation about connections to drug trafficking and people in Lindsay's extended social circles. Those indicators were the planning, the sophisticated planning, the burner phone, the deliberate deception. But I think there's some weaknesses here. Professional contract killers typically favor firearms, not knives, speed, and minimal emotional expression. When you have close to 40 stab wounds, you're introducing a lot of emotion and you're introducing a lot of risk. This is less consistent what I would see or what I've known to be classic contract killing. What are your thoughts on that stuff, Gail?
I think it was personal. Somebody wanted her dead to protect their own lifestyle or they were going down. They knew they could go to jail of what she saw. And I think somebody within her own circle in that family, I'm not saying they're guilty, but I'm saying they damn well have to know what happened and who did it. They just have to. And I do wonder about whoever ratted out the Alcazars that phone in November phoned the police to rat out that Calgary drug bust. I really have to wonder if that was don't look over here, look over there, a setup. It may sound extreme, but here we've got the end of November, somebody calling the police to tell them that there's a shipment of cocaine heading to Calgary. Now, the person I heard this, the who was the informant, we don't know 100% for sure who that was, the rat informant. But I was told by somebody very knowledgeable that the informant was a woman who worked in Jason's office at the time of Lindsay's murder and still works with Jason today. Well, it didn't leave a lot of people. There was two retired RCMP officers who I was talking to. They met with this woman who just turned out to be the handler of the informant who made that call. And it was the handler that told these two RCMP fellows that it was a woman that worked in Lindsay's office at the time of her murder and still worked with Jason today. Going, wow, why would someone do that? Why would they? You're going to trust your blue boy friends with serious stuff like that? Why would she lie? It was a woman. I don't think she'd lie to her own retired RCMP buddies, would she? About that? I don't know.
You know,
I went to the police with that information as well. And then you know what they said? You shouldn't be in possession of this information.
well, that
No.
tells you that you're barking up the right tree, Gail. I mean, look, I know, Jim knows, someone out there likely still knows what the truth is here. Saanich police, and you told me they repeated this. They've emphasized this point. But cases like this aren't solved not by forensic breakthroughs alone. You're really going to need relationship breakdowns, someone that has a guilt complex, someone that's running their mouth, and even loyalties that kind of dissolve. I mean, when you have a complex conspiracy, and this one is aged pretty well, but after years, people divorce, they fall out of favor with each other, they develop financial stress, they get locked up, or they seek relief from guilt. And when that happens, that creates opportunity. But you have to be ready for that opportunity. And sometimes I wonder if those opportunities haven't already presented themselves.
And Ray, if I can go back to what you were saying a little bit ago about the crime scene and the overkill, sustained aggression, it's also known as, that was personal. I think I'm certainly not ruling that out, but I think, and you said a professional killer, and I said that earlier, one shot to the head, one knife wound,
Right.
to an unsuspecting person catching by surprise, sort of an ambush. But I also think if the killer is told by their handler, the facilitator, whoever it is, that they also want to send a message, um, and I want you to make it a real bloody scene. I want you to really make her suffer, and I'll just leave it at that. Uh, they could go a little above and beyond what they would normally do in terms of undertaking an activity such as this, and they could make it extra violent and showing overkill and manifesting itself with the multiple stab wounds, because their other agenda is to shut other people up and say, look, no matter how innocent you are, no matter what kind of job you have out there, even selling homes and something not at all related to what we're doing on the side, the criminal activities, we can get you and we can take you down in the worst way you could ever expect. So this was still a contract hit, I believe. They're not as popular as the media makes them out to be, but in drug cartels, La Cosa Nostra, the mob, every once in a while, enemies, in potential informants, suspected informants, they feel they have to be taken out. They saw something in Lindsay that that bothered her, and that it looked like she may have been on the cusp of telling someone, and they said, take her out. But take her out with an agenda behind it and with no concern for her. Let the message get out there that other people know not to do what she even thought of doing, which apparently she never had the chance to do. So make it look like overkill, but really make her suffer, and make sure no one else who may have thought something, who heard something that Lindsay may have spoken to, wanted to take this out. And we're going to take them out so no one else comes forward and even thinks about doing what Lindsay perhaps was going to do.
Why Why would Shirley Zalo be threatening Lindsay's friends after the murder, telling them to keep their mouths shut? You know too much. You talk, the same could happen to you. I mean,
Who said that, Gail?
the Shirley Zalo with a couple of young girls in the car after the funeral, telling them to keep their mouths shut, warning them. And
What's your
yeah,
source of that information?
that's true information. There was a young girl, one of the young girls. Um, she got a call, I think it was the night or two after Lindsay's murder. This is a fact. She got a call after Lindsay's murder. And the woman was kind of talking with an accent, or she was kind of mumbling, but it was like 4 in the morning. She had worked the night shift and she was half asleep when she took the call. So the person blabbled on about something, I won't say what, it wasn't nice, and hung up. So this girl, smart enough, she kept, because the number was on her phone, she kept calling back several times. And it took a while. But guess who answered the phone? Shirley Zalo.
Hmm.
So she goes to the police with this information. The same cop that the other girls all saw and were treated very poorly. She tells him because she thought this is serious. He said, "Well, you know, dear, you were half asleep. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. You probably misunderstood what she said." Now it turns out that Shirley did admit to that call in time. She said that she meant to be calling the Nikki that worked in her office and didn't mean to be calling Lindsay's friend.
The stuff just keeps adding up.
There's challenges all over the place in this case. I mean, there's investigative challenges. Look, forensic evidence is at a minimum. There's really no clear DNA, which I find shocking. There's no murder weapon. Um, there's limited physical evidence. Uh, any digital evidence that you want to try and obtain from 2008 is going to be almost impossible, if not very difficult to get. And here's the thing, you get all these rumors that generate themselves, and it kind of breeds contamination because you get a lot of high profile cases that generate all these theories and enormous speculation. And what happens is all that noise and all those rumors can bury real leads. Sometimes when a case becomes polarized publicly around their favorite suspects, uh, a lot of times investigators or the investigation gets tunnel vision or kind of gets narrowed. And then you get all these competing theories, and it becomes very confusing to the individuals that are out there observing, and they don't know what to believe or what to support. So, and people expect the police to tell them something when an investigation is going on, and that doesn't happen. The integrity of the investigation is important, and they keep it very, very close to the chest to protect the integrity of the investigation, and the confidentiality of the information they're obtaining. So I get that aspect of it because I did it as well. But I just see this I think it's potential. I think it's solvable. But Jim and I have said this 100 times. Almost every time we do it, it needs a fresh set of eyes. It really, really does.
Out of another agency and set up a
Yeah.
task force and hopefully RCMP, any provincial police. Uh,
RCMP has been involved since the very beginning.
all right. Well, they got to take over then. Maybe they're not being given all the information they're asking for. I don't know.
I have to question this one police officer in Saanich that has done his utmost to protect the Zalo family. No matter what the girls said, he treated them poorly, and they were only there for one reason, not to talk about anything but the Zalos. And also some of the information he put out to the public. Like, I still can't believe it. You know, one of the witnesses, there was two witnesses, independent witnesses. One of them spoke to Czech News. One of them contacted Jeff Buziak as well, that same witness. And he said, I drove by and I didn't get a clear view of the woman, but I saw the man in the long dark coat. It was on Czech News.
Hmm.
Chris Horsley put out that Jason gave a description of the witness too, because he saw the man go back in, and that's the description they gave to the media, not the man in the red long coat, like the witness said. Jason Zalo said the man was wearing a two-tone, classy brown jacket hanging just below the waist. Well, wait a minute. What happened to the witness that was driving by? He said the man was wearing a long coat. They went with Jason's statement. I don't get it.
I agree.
More discrepancies than consistencies, that's for sure.
There are so many discrepancies. He put out there that Lindsay wasn't apprehensive about the showing, but everybody else said she was. He put out there that Jason was going to the house because he had documents for Lindsay to sign. This is a lead investigator. No, he wasn't. There was nothing for Lindsay to sign that night. And there were several other things he said too, totally contradictory to the truth. And I don't care what his reasons are. None of them make sense to any of us. And I just have to wonder about that guy.
I hear you.
Ray, we're winding down here. Do you want to do a few of our audience questions?
Well, before that, Jim, I want to give my 2 cents on this. I'm going to take a leap here, and I wrote a couple things down. But the one thing I want to say is I believe that the offender likely had some connection to Lindsay, either directly or indirectly. This murder appears to me to be too specific, too controlled, and too informed to be random. So if I'm going to look at this, I came up with 4 areas that I would look at. I would reconstruct who knew Lindsay would accept the showing. I would rebuild all communications surrounding that appointment. I would re-examine who had access to her private number. And I would focus on behavioral inconsistencies in the people around her and before and after the murder. And that includes Shirley Zalo, Jason Zalo, and anybody else. In plain terms, in my estimation, the key to solving this case does not lie in the 2 people who walked into the house. It lies in identifying the person or people who knew exactly how to get her in there. That's my 2 cents, Jim and Gail.
I'd like to say one thing before we say goodbye. The lead investigator in this case left Saanich in 2021. 2 new investigators took over, and I believe in my heart that they're good guys doing a great job with what they can. Sergeant Aaron Murray and Jazz Dollywall. They've been the 2 that took the place of the officer who retired. All I can say, our hope is on them, and I admire them. I really think they want to solve this case, but I have to wonder if too much has gone on and too many mistakes have been made that they'll never be able to do it, even if they want to. But my hat's off to those 2. Thank you.
And Ray, I'll just add to what you offered. There is a wide circle of people associated with Lindsay from back in that time frame. Maybe not all of them today, but I'll bet you if they were dirty back then, they're dirty now.
Mm-hmm.
And if the police could legally and through the Canadian Constitution and all laws and protocols do investigations on some of them right now, even their adult children, and some of them legally and constitutionally get jammed up and they're facing some prison time for something, you'd be surprised who may want to all of a sudden offer, well, I'm looking at 20 years in prison. I know something that happened about 20 years ago. Could we work out a deal here? So the point is some proactive investigation of all these people, who's on parole, who's on probation, and start investigating them, what they're doing, and see if one of them want to come forward, not voluntarily probably, but also but to offer information about what happened in February of 2008 to Lindsay, and perhaps that can start the ball rolling in terms of who actually killed that young woman.
When you say that, just so you know, every one of those guys that was busted in the Calgary bus was offered an immunity agreement if they came forward and told what happened to Lindsay, rather than go to prison. they were free. Not one of them.
Yeah, but you know what? They're all out too, Gail. And you have to understand, would I rather do 3 years in prison or a lifetime dead? And I'll take the 3 years in prison.
Mm-hmm.
But they're older now. Allegiances change.
Correct.
Familiarity changes, and deals are made. And people who were powerful before, not so much now. I'm just saying, all those people should be investigated from back then. But right now, surreptitiously, perhaps, of course, legally. And if something can come up, it's amazing how you get one person to cooperate a little bit, then another person starts talking, and there's all kinds of mechanisms, investigative mechanisms used, and somehow a case like this can be solved. These we've given these people some credit, some kudos. They've gotten away with it. These are not criminal masterminds. Much of it was luck and timing, and perhaps with the police department who just wasn't used to doing homicide investigations.
And a tight
And
knit family who will stick together forever. Maybe tight
say
knit
that again.
group. Tight knit group of people who will stick together loyalty forever.
That's been said before, and John Gotti found out it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, a
Okay.
lot of the
And
mob
again,
guys.
I'm not comparing these guys to John Gotti and his top capos, but allegiances do change, and with the right pressure, again, emphasizing legal, these matters can be these can be resolved even 20 to 25 years later.
And we now have Jason Zalo living the high life on Bear Mountain, living this $3 million home, driving Land Rovers. Just recently attended the Victoria Hospital Gala, very fancy affair, fundraiser, Victoria General Hospital. Standing right with his wife, looking very, very dapper. Just wonderful.
And again, everyone who we mention here, innocent until proven guilty. They have right of due process. A lot of some facts, some innuendo, some suggestions here, but we just on Cold Red we deal with evidence, and we want to make sure everything is done that way. Ray, a few minutes here. Do you want to go into a question or two?
Uh, yeah, that's fine. I can go into one.
I think we answered a lot of them in this
We did.
conversation.
Here's one. It said, given how tightly Saanich law enforcement has held the details of Lindsay's case, Gail, have your direct interactions with law enforcement felt more like a collaborative exchange of information, or is it kind of a one-way street?
It's a one-way street. They took my information. They were very polite.
Mm.
And I had coffee a couple times with the lead investigator. He was very polite, very, you can't help but like him. It's very likable. But that doesn't mean a damn thing, does it?
No, it usually doesn't.
I'll just ask to all of us here, what are the most dangerous myths or pieces of disinformation that have compromised the public's understanding of the witnesses and suspects over the last 18 years?
Well, it's interesting because, we've got Chris Horsley, who lead detective, who went on publicly many times and said, there's misinformation on these blogs. These blogs are useless. People are putting false information on there. Maybe that's true because they're not informed and they don't know, right? Some people just don't know the facts. They're trying to help. But you've got Chris Horsey going out there and giving all this false information too. So who the hell does he think he is?
Well, I'll tell you, and I'll open this up, and I know Jim will agree with me. I invite Chris Horsley to come on the show. He's retired from Saanich. I know he's with another police department, but I'd love him to come on and see if he can help us solve this thing. And I want to offer that same thing to the two new detectives. You don't have to share anything that's going to affect the integrity of the case, but come on and keep this thing alive, and maybe we'll generate some leads for you. Maybe we may be able to help with our expertise as well.
Ray, I'm going to take it a step farther. I'm going to say, come to the VDOC Society first. You can go right by Cold Red. Maybe it's a wrong direction for us here, production-wise, but Ray and I both belong to the VDOC Society. You want this case solved, we can certainly help you there with the hundreds of experts that are in that room that day. So If you want to skip the podcast route, come into a controlled situation in which no one will talk afterwards. It'll all be kept, secret, so to speak. You need outside eyes, as we said back in January. We said earlier, we said last week, earlier today, to look at this case. And your internal eyes, and even with some help, RCMP, whomever, it's been almost 20 years, going on 19, soon to be
Yeah.
20. You ain't getting it done. And you another set of eyes with all the information, holding nothing back. And it won't just happen in those few hours at the meeting. We'll keep in touch with you for months or years afterwards, if necessary, as new leads come in. So I would encourage, in fact, you officers, the ones still on board at Saanich, consider coming down to us. The expenses are all paid by VDOC. It's just, and I will make sure you get in the door on the time frame that works for you. And Ray and I will be in the room with you that day with no preconceived notions. Present the case cold to all the experts in the room, lawyers, DNA people, anthropologists, pathologists, profilers, you name it, and investigators out the wahoo. And I guarantee you, you'll get some help on your case. The question is, do you want that help? I hope you do.
It's there. Jim is right. The help is there. All you need to do is ask, and we are more than willing to help you in any way we can. With that said, Jim, Gail, you know what, Gail? You would have made a great agent, an FBI agent. You would have been a very good FBI agent. And I would have worked with you, and we would have kicked in some doors. You would have been very good. I'm so glad that you came on this show and we had the chance to meet and talk. You're one special person. Thank you
Thank
for
you
all
very
you do,
much.
Gail.
Thank you. I want to see this case solved.
Well, when it is, we'll bring you back, and we'll talk about all the public information that we can. Everybody out there, thank you for watching this or listening to this episode of Cold Red. Thank you, Gail. Thank you, Ray, for being part of it. Please check us out on all our social media sites, our blog sites, our website, coldredpodcast.com. Thanks to our producers, Matt Robinson, Matt McLaughlin, our music coordinator, Rick Silling. I want to give a special shout out to some longtime fans of the show, and that's Tim and Maureen Lamplew and Jim and Ginny Coyle. Thanks for being supporters and subscribers from the get-go. Everyone, be careful out there. Watch your surroundings. It may just save your life. And everyone, we will see you next time on Cold Red.